OwnBet.com, #1 MMA sportsbook in the world. They offer the best UFC odds, live betting, and covers all big MMA promotions with huge prop markets and odds. OwnBet also runs an exclusive MMA pick'em for UFC events. Parlay each event and win up to $2,500 in cash. Entry fee is only $1 for each bet slip. Use promo code FIGHT SOCIETY and get the best MMA bonus out there, 200% bonus. Sign up today at OwnBet.com. That's OwnBet, OHMBET.com. Welcome back to the Fight Society podcast. I'm Damon Martin. He is Matt Brown. And Matt, we didn't get to do a pre-show because we got kind of late in the week, so we're here with a post-show. So we talk about UFC 220 and some fight. I heard there's this fight coming up. I heard this Ohio guy is fighting Carlos Condit. I don't know what the story is with that. So lots of stuff to talk about today.
Yeah, we'll see, man. Haven't signed no bout agreements yet. So as we know, until the ink is on the paper, you know, you got to keep it low key, man. You just don't know what's going to happen, right?
Yeah, but hypothetically, if you were fighting Carlos Condit, would you be excited about that?
Of course. Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about it a few weeks ago. Man, that's a fight that I would get stoked for. Obviously, I think Carlos would too, and I think it'd be a great time. Both of us go in there and beat the shit out of each other.
I know you said if you were gonna come out of retirement or semi-retirement, whatever, it had to be a fight that made sense and get you excited. How do you not get excited to fight Carlos Condit? I mean, that's like the perfect, you know what I mean? Like, that's like Diego Sanchez. Like, how do you not get excited to fight a guy like that, you know?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And that's, you know, I'm just honored, man, that I'm in this position where I'm fighting these guys at that level, and you know, they're excited to fight me, and I'm excited to fight them. And I mean, you know, I've worked years and years for this, man, and I'm finally up to where I'm at now. And you know, I just want to keep the ball rolling, man. I want to get this win, and you know, that'll feel really great for me. I think it'd say a lot for my career.
I remember we talked after the Diego fight, and you said that, you weren't going to make any decisions about your career. You're just kind of, playing it by ear. Is that kind of how you feel like with the Condit fight too? If the Condit fight happens, hypothetically, just like, because I think that's, I don't know, tell me, but I think it's kind of a good way to handle things. Like, if you feel good, you want to keep going, you keep going. If things go great, you decide not to keep going. Like, I feel like you can kind of make your decision with each fight.
Yeah, there was a little bit of that certainly after I fought Diego. I think specifically right after I got done fighting him, there was a lot of kind of just up in the air, maybe I'll retire, maybe not. I had such a great camp was the big thing. I had a great camp with Diego and felt great the whole time. I had the right people around me. So once I pretty much knew that I was going to be fighting again after that camp, I think. But it was just a matter of, do I take a year off, 2 years, 4 years like GSP, or, does it come right away? And when the opportunity with Condit came up, of course I had to jump right on that. And again, I mean, I don't think there's a fight fan out there that won't be excited to see that. And it's going to be, as far as I understand it, it's going to be on Big Fox. Every fight fan will get to see it. And I've always had good luck on Big Fox.
I joked on, I think it was Friday or Saturday when they announced that Justin Gaethje and Dustin Poirier were going to be the main event on that card. I said, if that's the main event and you and Condit end up being the co-main event, they might as well just nickname that card There Will Be Blood, because there's no way that's not going to be like the greatest fight card in history with just those two fights. You don't need anything else. Those two fights, I'm done.
It's hard to imagine much better, huh? But, I don't anticipate me and Carlos having a great fight. I think I'm going to go in there and I'm going to walk through him. I think I'm going to beat him pretty good and pretty handedly. So that's what I plan on doing, and I don't think it's going to be quite as exciting as people are expecting it to be.
What we talked about this after he fought Neil, because obviously Neil's one of your teammates, so you know Neil as good as anybody in the sport. And you paid credit to Neil for having a smart game plan and approaching Condit the right way. And I think people took away credit from Neil unjustly by saying that Condit was, ring rust and he'd been off. You don't give enough credit to Neil Magny for being a fucking good fighter. Neil Magny doesn't get nearly enough credit. But that being said, what do you expect out of Carlos Condit? Like, do you think he'll come in looking better? Do you think I don't know. Like, it's hard to predict what he's going to look like.
Yeah, I guess that fight with Neil, there was a little bit of, was it Neil or was it Condit, right?
Right.
I think Condit did not look it totally himself, but Neil has a way of making people not look themselves. So, yeah, there's a little bit of, which one was it? To be honest, I can't worry about it. What I'm expecting is that Condit's going to want redemption. There had to be some reason that he wanted to turn around so quickly and get right back in there. He had just come off of a semi-retirement also. And the fact that he just wanted to get right back in there makes me feel like he probably has something he wants to prove. And he thinks that I'm going to be a stepping stone to be able to prove that.
This is only a fighter can answer this question, so tell me if I'm wrong or if I'm off base by thinking this. But one of the things I thought about Conor, I said the same thing about Ronda Rousey after she got knocked out by Holly Holm. Certain fighters, when they get hit a certain way or get knocked out a certain way, like I feel like they never, when I said they never come back the same, I feel like they never, like there's a certain hesitancy when they get punched. Like I can't, like, oh man, I'm about to get hit. You know what I mean? Like I felt like there was a little bit of that in Condit. Like after he had the Lawler fight, which was just a fucking war, and then he got rattled by Maia, which was unexpected, you know what I mean? Because Maia's not known as like a power puncher. He got rattled by Maia. I thought there was a little bit of that in the Magny fight where it's like, I don't want to say, I hate using the word he was afraid to get hit, but there's no other way to say it. But that's kind of like a little bit of hesitancy. Like he was kind of gun shy.
Yeah, you have to, again, that's another thing that we can kind of say hypothetically, sort of put two and two together and come to that assumption, but that doesn't make it true either. So, our 2 and 2 might be equaling 3.95 when, like it doesn't always add up just the way we think it does. So, I have to assume that he's going to be the best Condit that we've ever seen, and that I got to give him the benefit of the doubt. For my own good, that he had ring rust and wasn't sharp and this and that, and I have to assume that. I have to assume that he's going to want redemption. He's going to come in. He's going to want to put a whopping on me to prove that he's back, and so I have to put all these things in my head like that. And to be honest, I mean, I think at this point I've been doing this long enough that. I don't honestly, I don't put a lot of concern into the opponent anymore. I mean, I have to look at the basics, and I think all of us have watched Condit long enough for as many years, and we know what he's, we know what he's going to do. We know what he's coming in looking to do, and it's just up to me to approach that in the most intelligent manner, and for me to create a game plan for my own strengths and weaknesses, and against his game, and not worry about really whether he's in top form or not.
Yeah, I like the attitude though. This isn't going to be fight of the night. I like that attitude. Like everyone's going to look at this just like they're going to look at Gaethje Poirier and say this is going to be a war. It's going to be a battle. But I'm sure if you talk to Justin and Dustin, they're like, I'd rather not get punched 100 times in the head to win a fight. Like I'd rather go out there, knock him out. Win a performance bonus, but this fight of the night shit, like I'm okay with not winning fight of the night. Yeah,
that's the thing is that everybody like, dude, it's gonna be fight of the night. Like, man, like, don't you want that bonus? Like, I wouldn't mind. I could use the money, but I could also use the brain cells. I mean,
hey, you can get a bonus without fight of the night. You get performance of the night just as easily.
Absolutely. So that's exactly it, and. Everybody expects, man, you're going to put on fight of the night. It's like, well, it's not really what I'm shooting for here, because that means that we're both getting beat up. So That's not really the end goal, but I'll take it.
Well, see, I say it all the time. Like I said it. I can't remember who I was talking to last week. I was talking to a fighter, and I was said something about like, you know, it's like complimenting somebody on having a great chin. Like I gotta get it conditioned out of my head to say fight of the night when I talk about these fights, because it's like saying you have a great chin. Like, yes, that's, you know, you have a great chin, you can take a punch. But it's also kind of a backhanded compliment if you think about it. That means you're getting hit a lot. Like, I say that all the time. Like, when they talked about Roy Nelson, like, Roy Nelson has a hell of a chin. Awesome, but he's also absorbed more significant strikes than anyone in UFC history. Like, do you really want that to be your mark on the sport? That you got hit more than anybody else, you know? Like, so it's a... So saying fight of the night is a weird compliment, you know?
Yeah, everybody said that especially after Hunt fought Crow Cop in K1, right?
Yeah.
And he's got such a good chin. Like, yeah, and he also got kicked in the head like 10 times to realize he had a good chin.
Yeah, like, dude, there's something to be said for not getting hit, you know? Like, that's why I said I got to condition myself to stop asking people, like, man, this is fight of the night. Like, how about knockout or performance of the night instead of fight of the night? Because if you get in the fight of the night, that means you landed 120 shots, he landed 100 shots, you're both going to the hospital, you know, your eyes busted up. Nobody really wants that. Like, you don't ever really want to go through that.
See, in some respects, yeah. I mean, it's not necessarily it's not the game plan, right? I think that's where people mess up, is that's not the game plan, but in some ways, I mean, I kind of want that too. You know, I want a fucking war, man. You know, I want to battle it out. You know, you want it to be hard and get dirty. I mean, those are the kind of fights I like. I think Condit, that's the kind of fights he likes, and that's why this makes for a great matchup. But, you know, again, it's not the game plan, though, right? And it will certainly take the one-punch knockout, the takedown, choke him out, you know, style over the war. But, man, you know, when I look back, you know, some of the wars that I've had, I mean, I wouldn't take those back for an easy fight ever.
Yeah, it's funny because, you know, for as long as I've known you, outside of like interviews for the sport, like being friends with you, has there ever been a fight in your career that I've talked to you more about than Carlos Condit? Because I don't think it's possible. I've talked to you about this fight. Like, dude, I brought it up to you, like, literally, we've been doing the podcast for like 3 years, and I brought it up to you at least like once every 6 months. I'm like, remember you were supposed to fight Carlos Condit?
Well, yeah. And I guess it was, you know, really, you were excited to watch that fight.
Dude.
In what, 2012? What was it, 2012, right?
2000, yeah, it was like 6 years ago, 5-6 years ago. Like, I've never let it go, man. It's like, I've never forgotten about it.
Yeah, well, your wish is coming true, Damon.
You guys did a press conference originally for that fight, didn't you? Like, were you guys faced off or whatever? Didn't that actually happen at one point?
Yes, we did. Yeah.
Okay, I thought so. I thought because it was you and him, and it was DJ and Benavidez on that card. Were you still training at Humes at that time, or were you somewhere else?
No, I was back at Ohio that time.
Okay.
That was I can't remember who was on that card. It was in Sacramento.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did the stared out there. I want to say, man, I may be way off here. But I think that was when they crowned Ronda the champion.
You're right. That's right. They brought out Ronda. That's right, because DJ was fighting Benavidez, but then Ronda got all the press because she came out and they gave her the title. You're absolutely right. I remember that now.
Yeah, okay. I was wondering if that was a different thing, but it seems like so long ago, man.
It does.
Got to the top of the world since then, and, well, I mean, there was Resistance and top of the world, and now, you know, we know what's happened between now and then, but man, what a crazy amount of MMA history that I've been a part of and been around.
Ronda's going to be out here in Ohio in a couple weeks.
For the Arnolds.
Yeah, she's coming out. She's getting inducted into that International Sports Hall of Fame or whatever.
Cool. Okay.
Her and Boss Rutan are both getting inducted, so.
Oh, cool. That'd be cool. And then I imagine that she does a lot with Max Effort Muscle, Corey Gregory. I imagine she'll be out there with him also.
Yeah. The Arnolds. Last year was the first year I haven't been to the Arnolds in like 6 years. I didn't go last year because it was the same weekend as Woodley and Wonder Boy, and it was supposed to be Ferguson Khabib, so I missed out on the Arnolds last year. But this year it's the same weekend as Holloway Edgar, but I'm not going to that fight. So I'm going to be home and I'm going to go to the Arnolds and I'm going to go to that Hall of Fame induction. You know, see Ronda and Boss Rutan, who I've known forever. Boss is a great guy. So
is it not Ronda Brown now?
I don't think she's changed her last name. I think she's keeping her last name. It's like I'd imagine for like publicity, it's easier to keep her last name. You know what I mean? Like everyone knows her as Ronda Rousey. You know, like
yeah, all right.
Maybe she'll hyphenate it. Ronda Rousey Brown. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah, no, it just doesn't ring as well. Like, Ronda Brown sounds like you're like 80 years old, like sitting on the front porch.
That sounds like your accountant's secretary. Like, this is my accountant, Ronda Brown.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Or I probably have someone in my family named Ronda Brown that's just, you know, one of my hillbilly aunts that's chewing tobacco and just, you know, drinking whiskey on the front porch in Kentucky.
Dude, every time we drive through Ohio, like when I go to Cincy or anything, anytime I drive by Xenia, I immediately laugh and think about it because I always forget you were from Xenia. Like, I always remember you being from Xenia.
Well, you know, I was born in Xenia.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Like, I always remember that. Like, I always associate that in my head when I pass Xenia on the highway.
Well, if you ever drive to Cincinnati on 71 South, and you look over to the right, there's an exit for State Route 72. I think it says Sabina, I think. And if you look over to the right, there's a blue water tower.
I do. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's the town I grew up in. 200 people population. I think on Wikipedia is officially 198.
Nice.
But yeah, and that we could. Man, I rode my bicycle to that little overpass right there on 71 and threw snowballs off the bridge. And when I was a kid, I mean, nothing to be proud of. You know, really not that funny. Look at, you know, when I think about it now. But when I was a little piece of shit, you know, 10-year-old with nothing to do in my little podunk town, that's how you end up.
Yeah, people don't know, man. If you live in Ohio, because I come from a small town too, Lucasville, which is, you know, 2 hours south of Columbus. Yeah, that's where I grew up. Like, Ohio's not a big state, but like if you're not in Cleveland, Columbus, or Cincinnati, you're living in kind of the hills a little bit. Like, you're not like there's not like my town. Like, my graduating class was 88 people. Like, I had 88 people in my graduating class. So like, there's a lot of really small pockets of area in Ohio.
Yeah, Lucasville's legendary for their flea market and their maximum security prison riot. I
lived through the prison riot in high school, bro. That's what that happened on Easter Sunday when I was like a sophomore in high school.
Damn. Did they shut the town down? Like, were they? I mean, they had to have been nervous, right?
Well, they let us out of school for an extra week. We got a 2-week spring break because we were opening. We had a brand new high school built, and it was right across the street from the prison. And when the prison riot broke out, I'm not even kidding. The high school was supposed to open after spring break. So the prison riot happened on Easter Sunday. They shut down the high school and turned it into like a Red Cross, like, you know, emergency center. Because it's literally across the street from the prison. And so we got out of school for that entire week. And because the governor declared a state of emergency, we didn't have to make up the time. So like we got a 2-week spring break for nothing.
That's some Lucasville, Ohio shit right there. Build a prison on one side of the street and a high school on the other.
That's like a hint of like, okay, if you fuck up too bad, that's where you're going, right across the street.
Scared straight, right? Dude, I did not know you grew up in Lucasville. Why does this come up in our conversation?
Well, because I always say I'm from Cincinnati because that's where I've lived the majority of my life. Like, I lived in Cincinnati the majority of my life, but I grew up like as a kid in Lucasville. So, like, that's where
Loper was not too far from you, huh?
No, he was in Portsmouth. He was like in the big town of my small town. Like Portsmouth is the big town to my small town. But yeah, his grandma lived in Portsmouth.
That's so funny because my family that I talk about, the hillbillies, part of my family, I mean, they're just another, 20, 30 miles south in Grayson, Kentucky.
Yeah. Yeah, like Portsmouth is like as close as Cincinnati is to Kentucky, like the bridge. That's how close Portsmouth is. Like, you can cross into Kentucky like 2 seconds. Yeah.
Like, you go right across the bridge, and like it probably feels like 20, 30 miles. It's probably like 5 because it's all back roads and one-lane back roads. And, yeah, my family's right there, man. We used to go down there all the time. We drove right by you, I bet.
Yeah. Yeah, so we grew up down there, old Lucasville, Ohio, and then Portsmouth. And, yeah, man, I don't go back there too often anymore. My family's, pretty much gone now, passed away and stuff, so I don't really go back down there. But I don't think it's really developed much since I lived there, so.
Well, nice flea market. So what else is going on?
Well, we didn't get to talk about it beforehand, but I assume you watch UFC 220.
I didn't. I read all about it, and I meant to watch it before we did the show, but I didn't get time to get around to it. I had date night with the wife. I'm a grown man and got to do grown man shit, so this is how it works these days.
We both predicted correctly, though. Stipe held on to his title, defeated Francis Ngannou, 5-round decision, pretty dominant. If you didn't see it, it was a lot of, first round with Stipe kind of ducking and dodging, a lot of head movement. About 3 minutes into the first round, Francis was already breathing heavy. And then from there, it was just all Stipe. I mean, Stipe just took him apart, out-wrestled him, outworked him, outstruck him. I mean, it was pretty much a clinic from that. About 3 minutes in, till the end of the fight, it was all Stipe.
Sound like the first round was pretty exciting, huh? I mean, probably a lot of tension, just... man, when Ngannou hits you, it could happen any second now. And then almost like a Mike Tyson fight, right? Like there's all this tension, then he kind of drops off, and you're like, all right, this is what it is.
Yeah, it was pretty clear, like, after that first round, like, Francis didn't have a big gas tank, which I kind of expected. I mean, we talked about that 2 weeks ago, that, like, what's this guy going to do in the third, fourth, fifth rounds? And then it was also abundantly clear he doesn't have much of a ground game, because when Stipe got him down, like, he powered his way up a couple times with, like, no technique, like, basically just like, I'm bigger than you, I'm stronger than you, so I'm going to muscle my way up. But, like, once he got stuck on, like, all fours and everything, like, he just had no answer. Like, Stipe basically held him in place and just kept punching him. Like, this is, like, a credit to Stipe and obviously Francis. Like, you could tell Francis didn't know where he was going, especially with a Division I college wrestler on top of him, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it seems, that's the problem with getting away with what he's done, right? Or the problem with, not necessarily getting away with, but the problem with being as successful as he's been the way that he has, right? With just the big punches and short fights, and... it's hard to not believe it's going to happen again, right? It's hard to believe that's not your fate or your destiny to do it all the way to the top.
Well, that was, that's every great fighter that I can remember talking about over the past, 3 or 4 years we've been doing the podcast. I say it all the time. You learn about them when they face adversity. You know what I mean? Like, what will happen to Ronda when she didn't control the fight and just, take people down or do what she wanted to do? And we saw it happen with Holly Holm. What happens when John Jones was put into trouble? Alexander Gustafsson gave him a fight, but John found a way through. We saw how John reacts to adversity. Ngannou was so dominant that, I get it. Everyone thought he was going to be a first-round knockout. He's so powerful, but what happens when he faced adversity? He was not ready for it. He was absolutely 100% not ready for that.
Interesting, very interesting. Yeah, like you said, we've seen it with the greatest champions, and maybe the best thing that happens to Ngannou. He's going to be tougher the next time he fights Stipe, that's for sure, assuming that he gets back to fight Stipe. But, man, we got to think he's going to get in the cardio room, get on that treadmill, put in a little bit more work there, maybe get, whatever he's got to do, he's going to go figure out a strategy to fix that up and, come back, and it's gonna be a great fight, man, when they fight again.
I talked to Derek Lewis today, and Derek is not the biggest Ngannou fan, but one thing he said, he's like, if Francis is going to gain cardio, what he said to me was, as a heavyweight, he's like, he's got to drop some of that muscle. He's just too big, like, muscle-wise, and he's like, if he drops that muscle, he might lose some of his power. So it's like a catch-22. Like, which one means more? Like, does he want to be more powerful, or does he want to have cardio?
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm talking about, where, what he's done, what he expected to work for him is what he has done this whole time. And he hasn't adapted and hasn't needed to adapt. And now we're going to find out, I think a lot about, whatever camp he has, his coaches around him, and his own resolve. And I think it's pretty clear he has the talent. He has much of what it takes to be a world champion. Whether he could beat Stipe, I don't know, because I would say it's pretty well agreed upon that he's probably the greatest heavyweight of all time at this point. And I think Fedor would be the only one that we would debate that about, right? And
let's talk about it. Because I said it on Saturday night, and Coley was giving me some shit today. I don't know if you saw it on Instagram. Mark Coleman was giving me shit on Instagram because I called Stipe the GOAT, and he's like, "Oh, I'm just a bum, huh?" But anyways, but I said, listen, Stipe to me is the greatest UFC heavyweight champion now, because if you look at the guys, it's not just because he broke the
greatest heavyweight champion, not just UFC. Greatest heavyweight. He's definitely UFC head.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, greatest UFC heavyweight champion for sure. Not just because of the title defenses, though. When you look at the guys he's beaten on this win streak, I mean, Hunt, Verdum, Overeem, he's beating a lot of good guys on this win streak right now, and then beating Ngannou the way he did. To me, he's the greatest UFC heavyweight of all time. Now, the real debate to me is he surpassed Fedor? Did he surpass Fedor? And I think that question for me comes down to at what point do you stop rating Fedor? And what I mean by that is like, do you say at the end of his Pride career that was it? Like, are we only looking at that scan of time? Because if you go beyond that, and you see him get knocked out by Dan Henderson, not that there's anything wrong with losing to Dan Henderson, but Dan Henderson's not a heavyweight. He's just not. You know what I mean? He's a middleweight who masqueraded as a light heavyweight, okay? He's not a heavyweight. He got knocked out by Dan Henderson. He got mauled by Antonio Silva. He got tapped out by Verdum. He lost to Matt Mitrione. Are we counting all of that as the body of work? Because if we are, yes, Stipe lost to Stefan Struve, which is not his shining moment, but he had a battle with Dos Santos that went both ways, and Dos Santos is obviously a phenomenal fighter. If you're going to look at the records just based on those things, you could say Stipe actually has a better resume. I mean, he's only lost once, really, to a bad loss to Stefan, and he's had a ton of good wins. But if you're just looking at Fedor and Pride, you could say, well, during that stretch where he had like 20 wins in a row or whatever and was so dominant, you can sit there and say, well, it was Fedor, beating Nogueira in his prime, beating Krokop in his prime, beating Heath Herring in his prime. It depends on how you want to judge it, because if you're judging by an entire body of work, and the fact is Stipe is not done yet, but if you're judging right now in this snapshot of time, to me, Stipe is better because he hasn't suffered through those losses the way Fedor has. Like, you kind of feel like Fedor, like, I think after he lost to Verdum and, like, a couple other fights, you're almost like, dude, stop. Like, you're just not helping your legacy right now.
Man, I think you bring up a great point. Yeah, I think it's I don't think I could have said it any better. I think that's a lot. Because really, Fedor had, like you said, the long run in Pride, and he beat some great names. Obviously, they were great at the time, right? That's the big difference. At that time, they were the best in the world, and he did it for a long time. You also had a lot of in-between fights too, right? That were fed to him, and there's no question about that. And then I personally, I mean, at this point, I put Stipe above him. I think I get the argument on the other side. I just don't agree with it. I mean, I think Fedor, unfortunately, if he would have retired when he originally retired and stayed retired, it would have been a very difficult argument. But him losing to these guys, we can only, we don't know if he's in the prime of his career or whether he's, I should say, we don't know if he's losing to these guys because of the point that he's at in his career or because these guys are just better, right?
Yeah. Well, the two things I held with Fedor was one, like my one kind of knock on his Pride streak was he had a lot of bums in there. I mean, let's be honest, like beating Hongman Choi and beating Zulu and like some of these other random, like weird, Japanese freak show fights. To me, don't do anything for his record, because you could easily throw Stipe 5 bums in a row and he would just knock him out and he'd have 10 wins in a row and he'd be on the same track. So I think that's part that hurts him. the part that helps him, in my opinion, in Fedor, and I know this is like kind of like the unspoken part of MMA, is let's not forget Fedor fought at a time in Pride when drug testing was not done. So like when he fought Crow Cop, let's be honest, that Crow Cop was probably on a little extra supplement. You know what I mean? Like that Crow Cop at that time was probably not completely natural. So like, but then when you look at his record, like you look at the best guys that Fedor beat, you look at Nogueira a couple times, and you look at Crow Cop, which are definitely his biggest wins, and maybe Heath Herring at the time. Obviously, Mark Coleman, when Mark was coming off the Grand Prix originally, you know what I mean? Randleman's in there, and obviously we always have the utmost respect for Randleman. But if you're talking, just in terms of overall record, I mean, you look at, Roy Nelson at the time, who was a very, very dangerous heavyweight when he fought Stipe. Stipe was coming off a loss, and he beat Roy Nelson, who was still a top 7-8 guy at that time. Verdum knocked him out. Overeem knocked him out. Mark Hunt punished him. Dos Santos. I mean, it's just, I don't know, man. Like I said, I'm not trying to downgrade Fedor, but like mark for mark, resume for resume, I think there's an argument to be made that Stipe is better.
Yeah, I agree. I couldn't agree more. I think you hit the nail right on the head. And the other thing I would also say to add to that is when it gets that close, like for one, Stipe's not done. I think he's gonna win a few more, and there won't be any question, right? Right. Be a point where we're just like, it's just Stipe, right? But at this point, I think it's pretty even, and I've leaned towards Stipe. But the one thing I kind of think is Fedor in his prime versus Stipe in his prime, which is right now. I got Stipe winning that fight.
Dude, it's like you read my mind. I was just going to ask you that question. You take a prime Fedor, like Pride Fedor, against Stipe right now, who wins? I think Stipe wins that fight. I think Stipe is much cleaner with his boxing. His wrestling is better in terms of technical wrestling, so he's not going to get, and I think the one area where Fedor had to have a chance would be in a scramble on the ground, because Fedor was really good off his back. He had some really nasty arm bars and stuff off his back, like when he got Coleman a couple times and when he got some guys like that. But I think skill for skill, man, I think Stipe beats like a prime Fedor, because Fedor used to get really wild. I think people forget how wild he used to get with his strikes. And I think Stipe eats that alive, especially considering Fedor would be giving up size to Stipe. Like Fedor would be weighing 225, Stipe would be weighing 240, and he's still going to be very strong, very and Stipe is very technical. He's not a guy who goes in there and just starts winging windmill punches.
I think that's the biggest tragedy with Fedor is he never fought at his natural weight class, and that was a lot of people would give him extra credit, so to speak, for him beating these bigger guys. And I don't personally do that at all. I think you chose to fight in that weight class. It's not the weight class you should be in. He should have been a 205er, and I would love to see him fight at 205 and really see him fight like Dan Henderson in his prime or Vanderlei during Pride. And boy, I mean there was a ton of fight.
Shogun and Fedor. Oh my God.
Even Alistar, he was at 205 for a while back then. Yeah. I mean there's so many great fights back then that would have been great fights for Fedor. And for whatever reason, he didn't want him to cut weight, I guess. Maybe, I guess Jesus didn't want him to cut weight or whatever.
I couldn't have said any better myself. You don't get to make an excuse. And not to say Fedor's made an excuse. I'm saying people making an excuse for Fedor saying he's undersized. You can't say that. That's like me saying... you don't get to make the excuse, and you don't get to use it to... rate him higher either because of it. Yeah, that's like me saying, I understand, you could sit here and say, well, Michael Bisping, was an undersized middleweight, but he won the title. It makes him the greatest middleweight of all time. No, it doesn't work that way. He chose to fight at that weight class. He could have cut weight and made light heavyweight. Fedor could have easily been a light heavyweight. He didn't want to do it. For whatever reason, good for him. He went out and had one of the greatest careers in history. But you don't get bonus points just because you were the smaller guy in a fight. I don't look at his career and say, well, Fedor's here and Stipe's here, but Fedor's a little bit better because he was 20 pounds lighter. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, right. I think that's another one of the things we could fix in MMA is have a cruiserweight division. I would love to see up to 225 weight class, 230. And then a heavyweight beyond that. And, Boxing has never done it. Their cruiserweight is like 190 or something like that. And I think MMA, where it's at, I think it could really use that.
Yeah, I think what hurts MMA is because light heavyweight is so weak right now. I mean, if you think about it, dude, like you got like right now in the UFC, you got like let's say Jones is in the mix. You got Jones, Cormier, who Cormier is saying he's retiring in a year, and I believe him. So Cormier's got a year left. Gustafson's there. He's injured a lot, but he's there. Ozdemir, who's just coming off that fight. You got Jimmy Manoa. I mean, the list is pretty short. I mean, OSP, Oven St. Preux's out there. I mean, there's a couple guys, but even in Bellator, like if you bring in Bellator, you got Ryan Bader, Phil Davis, Linton Vassell. There's like 3 guys there. I mean, it's a razor thin division, man, top to bottom. Even if you combine like organizations.
Interesting, yeah. Yeah, I was actually thinking if you combined organizations, it would get a lot bigger real quick, but I guess not. Yeah, that's funny.
Well, it's just weird because, like, years ago, like, where you're
that
talking
was
about...
the
Yeah, and here's the thing, and, like, at that time, when you're talking about cruiserweight, like, I was thinking of, like, a division, like, 195, like, between middleweight and light heavyweight, because you had guys like Rich Franklin, who we both know very well, who was... killing himself to make middleweight, but he was too small to fight the big light heavyweights. Like, he couldn't deal, like, when he fought Forrest Griffin, it was just too much weight, too much size. 195, like, him and Dan Henderson would have been, like, the kings of 195. Like, they were both guys who killed themselves to make middleweight, but they were still undersized for light heavyweight. But now you couldn't do that because there's just, I mean, there are guys that guarantee you guys would cut down from 205 to 195, but then what does that do to the 205-pound division? Like, there's already a lack of contenders. I mean, you got Cormier going to retire. We don't know what's going on with John Jones. Glover Teixeira, who I respect the hell out of, he's like 38. He can't go forever. You know what I mean? The guy can't. I mean, I guess he can fight until he's 40s, but I think at this point, what we've seen out of Glover is he's not going to be a champion unless something weird happens. It's not an insult. I'm just saying, like, I wouldn't put him as a threat to DC or Jones. You know what I mean? You got Gustafson, I guess, is the one guy, but Gustafson can't stay healthy to save his life. Like, like, that division's not in a good place.
Yeah, and I get that's a good argument against one of my wishes, which is just more weight classes altogether in MMA. I think we just simply need more weight classes. I think we need 175, a ton of guys, including myself. Those last 5 pounds I feel like are really the damaging pounds. Those are the ones that are creating the concussions more so than the rest of it. At least, when they're 15 pounds apart, I mean, it makes for a tough decision. I think that's why you see guys changing weight classes a lot. It makes for a very tough decision of, do I stay where I'm cutting a couple pounds or do I cut 15 fucking pounds?
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at me, I mean, I walk around 185 to 190. It's like, yeah, I could fight at my natural weight or, even cut, 2 or 3 pounds like I did on The Ultimate Fighter. Or do I cut 16, 17 pounds? That's a lot of fucking weight, man. And most guys are doing it, even at the lighter weight classes, which is when it becomes a higher percentage of their body weight. And but guys are doing it in all weight classes, and that's what makes it very difficult. And of course, I get the other side too, where you get boxing, and now you got these guys that are, all over different weight classes, and just really manipulating the whole system. And of course, they have all the different belts too, which doesn't make things any easier either. But I see both sides. But ultimately, I mean, having more weight classes, I think, does benefit the fighters. Maybe not the promotion, but certainly the fighters.
Well, I'm kind of drawn in the middle on this one because I think a lot of people say more divisions for weight cutting, and I'm not a big believer in that. I don't think that solves weight cutting because I think for every guy like yourself who would fight at 175 because it's a more natural division, you will get, I'm just making this up, like a Yoel Romero who thinks he can cut to 175 to have an advantage. He's going to kill himself to make 175 because he thinks he can cut that extra 10 pounds. He can't make 170, but 175 is doable. So in terms of the weight cutting thing, I don't think that's the answer because yes, you're going to create more divisions, but for every guy like yourself or like maybe a Kevin Lee who says 165 would be perfect for him, you're going to get a guy at 170, like let's just say like a Mike Perry or I don't know, like, somebody that's like a Gunnar Nelson, who is not a top tier guy who thinks he can maybe shed that extra 5 pounds, kill himself to get to 165, you know what I mean? But on the flip side, the argument that I like for that is we're in a stage of the game now where we need big fights. We need title fights. And we're finally entering an era where the UFC is all about these champion versus champion fights. I mean, they want to do Amanda Nunes, Chris Cyborg. We're going to see TJ Dillashaw against Demetrius Johnson. We've seen so, if they would allow fighters to hold 2 titles and defend them, you know what I mean? Like a guy could make 165 and 155, and they kind of have that, marquee of 2 titles like Conor did, maybe there's a benefit. Maybe you could sell fights better that way, you know what I mean?
Don't automatically assume it would be 10-pound weight differences either. There's a lot of different ways to go about that, and there's also, there's also a lot more steps that we can take to diminish some of the weight cutting problems, which I think are, it's either going to happen by the UFC and whatever top influential organizations taking the major steps like ONE FC did, or it's going to happen through, what has already created the steps that has happened, which is through people, going to the hospital like Uriah Hall and things like this, so one way or the other, it's going to end up happening,
I mean, dude, that Uriah Hall thing scared the shit out of me, man. That guy talking about having seizures and a mini heart attack or whatever and had to stay in the hospital, passed out. I mean, dude, that's like, that could have very well, and I'm not, trying to make light of the situation. That could have been our first death in the UFC from weight cutting. Like, that's how close I think Uriah Hall probably was to that. Like, you don't get to that point, and there's not some serious shit going on in your body. Yeah,
exactly. You're exactly right. And that's what I'm saying. Unfortunately, that's probably what's going to provoke change.
Yep.
It's probably not going to be me talking on the podcast. It's probably not going to be intelligent minds coming forward and saying this is what we need to do. That's one of the things I really respect about ONE FC. They've been proactive and they've taken the steps, and it's good what they're doing. And I think the UFC, again, it's going to cause them a big problem at some point. I mean, there's just no way that something bad is not going to happen. You really just can't give athletes that much freedom. Almost, I don't even know any other way to say it. You almost can't allow them to do whatever you want to your body, and we'll just trust that you'll do okay. Right? It's not the way it works. So either way, the changes are going to come, and I do think that's when I talk about adding more weight classes, I think that's one of many steps that would add to some fighter safety, not the only step.
No, I agree. I think it would help. I don't think it's the solution. I think it's one step towards the solution to give more options, but there's still more going on. But like when you hear about Joanna Jędrzejczyk saying she cut 15 pounds in 14 hours, I mean, fuck, man. Like there's just no healthy way to do that and then expect your body to bounce back.
Yeah, now she's a small person, so that's if she's, say, 100, so she'd be about 150 pounds to 135, right?
No, 115. Yeah, she's 115.
Yeah, so, that's more than 10% of her body weight at that point. And, there's been multiple studies showing that over 4% dehydration is when the real issues start coming in. So, for me, like I try to get down to that 4% before I'm cutting water. Now, it doesn't really happen, but I know myself, and I know tons of other fighters that have cut massive amounts of weight like that. Me personally, I cut 20 pounds once in one night. It was probably 3-4 hour session, 20 pounds of water. It was when I fought Pete Spratt, and I did it completely wrong. I was the people that were with me had me do it completely wrong. They had me do it the night before and slept like that. So, you're just asking for problems at that point. But that's not a unique story at all, right? Like you sit there and you talk to fighters. We'd sit there and try to top the other guy's story. Well, I cut 22 pounds in the sauna in 2 hours. Well, and most of them are probably true stories. It's not just ego trying to top the other story. Like you're telling what you really did, and This is a very, very common story and will certainly be a major issue that will have to be rectified at some point in some manner. And again, it's either going to come through, someone getting serious brain damage or death or something like that, or it's going to come through proactive work from the UFC.
I remember at UFC 53 back in like 2005 when Rich Franklin fought Evan Tanner for the middleweight title. And it was one of the first cards I ever went to as media. I had covered the sport for about a year and a half at that point. So I started in late 2003. So it's like one of the first cards I had covered in person. Obviously, I knew Rich. I've known you, Rich, forever. So I was going up, and I talked to Rich like a couple days before. I was like, "Hey, Rich, after the weigh-ins, can we do a quick little video, just like a last-minute preview of your fight?" Sure. So after the weigh-ins are over, they're in like the theater at the Trump Taj Mahal, I think is where it was. Rich comes off the scale and he makes weight and he does his face-off with Evan Tanner, and he comes over and he literally like puts his arm on me and he's like leaning on me as he's like eating a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. He always used to eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich after the weigh-in, and he was so depleted. You know what I mean? And I was like, holy shit! Like it was just like a eye-opening experience, like seeing it in person, seeing like how his body, like how he was just tortured. And then, he went out and performed the next night. He won the middleweight title. He knocks out Evan Tanner. It was an incredible performance. But, man, that was a really eye-opening experience for me to see. Because wrestling, like, I've been around wrestling my whole life, but wrestling's different. Because wrestling, you do same-day weigh-ins. You can't fuck with your body that bad because you got to wrestle 2 hours later. Like, you just can't do it. Like, yeah, you'll cut weight, but you can't cut 20 pounds because you're not going to be able to wrestle 2 hours later. You just can't do that in wrestling. You know what I mean? Guys still do it to certain extremes, but not like what we do in fighting, like not what we do in MMA. And man, it's just like an eye-opening experience to see what you guys put your bodies through.
And they also have the NCAA regulations. They now come in, they test your hydration levels, your fat levels, your weight, and I've never been through that process, so I don't know how well it works. I don't know how invasive it is or anything like that, but it's better than nothing, right? Like, even if there's a way to cheat it, there's a way to beat it, and, there is a way to still damage yourself. At least it's stopping some of them, right? At least some people don't know how to cheat it, and some people are going to mess up and not cheat it right or whatever, right? So, it's a little something, and I totally think there's a lot of ways that the UFC can make this work a lot better. I've always thought, for one thing, with the technology we have today, they could easily chip, microchip or whatever, or some, a scale. The UFC could give us scales that have whatever chip in it or whatever, and when we step on it, they see what our weight is all the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I don't know if that's some ridiculous, cost or anything. It with Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and all this shit that we have these days, it seems like it would be a pretty simple thing. I don't know what the logistics would be like, but
if you think about, a bathroom scale, a digital bathroom scale, and like some way to report it, like you have to like send them, even if it's like an email thing, like once a week, you have to send them like proof of your weight. Like you can't just tell them I'm weighing 170 pounds. Like you have to, somehow digitally prove to them what you're weighing. That doesn't, to me, that's not.
If they have a scale that, you just got to connect it to some Wi-Fi, and, you can't, it obviously have something, you can't alter it. It's their scale that you're just borrowing for your camp 6 weeks out. You can't alter it. You connect it to Wi-Fi once a day, and bam, it sends off the weight.
Yeah. Yeah, you cut down people because so many people aren't, they're coming in super duper heavy. They just can't, like they feel like, and maybe their bodies will do it, but it's just like Uriah Hall. Uriah Hall fought at middleweight his entire career. It's not like he was suddenly, going down a weight class. He was a middleweight. He just, his body shut down. There's no perfect, you've cut to welterweight for the past decade, basically. You know what I mean? But if you have a bad weight cut, you come in 5 pounds heavier than what you normally come in at, disaster can strike. That's just the reality of it.
Well, and to add to that, I mean, the one time in my entire life I've missed weight was when I fought Robbie Lawler. I missed by a half a pound. It wasn't a whole lot or anything. I think it was half a pound. I might have just completely lied to you. Whatever. I missed a little bit, right? And that was exactly what happened. My body had shut down. So just to give some backstory to that, I had everything written down. It was when I was 32 years old. I had literally every single thing written down that for a fight week, what I pack in my suitcase, what we do when we wake up in the morning, what we do at nighttime. And Tom Barry, my old strength and conditioning coach from Westside Barbell, would he would keep this notebook, and we knew exactly what we were eating, the caloric intake, the caloric output from beginning to end. And we'd done this multiple times and worked perfect, right? We everything was planned day in, day out, by the hour to a T. Well, all of a sudden, I'm fighting Robbie Lawler, and we did everything exactly like we'd always done before, but suddenly my body just stops cutting weight. And, I could have made the weight had I had a couple more hours, no question. You could suffer through it, right? But, what I'm getting at here, what my whole point is, as I'm telling you a story that probably could have been way shorter, what I'm getting at here is that, I did everything right, and I did it as before, but it still didn't come the same because my body had gotten older, my metabolism had changed, and all these numbers that we had that were tuned in and dialed in over the years were suddenly altered because of my body, because of, I assume because of my age, 32, and the number of times that I made weight before, the kidneys. I mean, there's cortisol. There's so many different little things that can play an effect here. And there's no question someone like Uriah could have done, my point is he could have done the same thing, but this time his body just didn't accept it, right? You could have followed the same diet and led up the same way, weighed in the same thing, and your body just isn't the same, though. Your body evolves over time and changes.
Well, yeah, it's just like, wrestlers, look at Daniel Cormier, cutting weight his entire life since he's a kid, cutting weight. He gets to the Olympics, kidneys shut down, just couldn't do it. You know what I mean? There's no, and it's not to say like, oh, you didn't take it seriously or you didn't eat the right things. Like sometimes your body just says, fuck you. I don't know a better way to say it. Sometimes your body just says, nope, not doing it.
Yeah, and that's one of the things they do in the NCAAs, right? I think halfway through the year or 3/4 of the way through the year, they give you an extra pound allowance.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a reality of it, man. It's just a reality of weight cutting. And like I said, at some point, your body just doesn't do it anymore. Your body doesn't want to react to it anymore. It's just the nature of the beast. That's why you see, like when Randy Couture fought at heavyweight in the latter part of his career, when he fought like Tim Sylvia and stuff and became champion again, like he was so much healthier because he wasn't killing himself to cut weight. You know what I mean? He was giving up size, but he was just so much healthier. You know what I mean? Like I heard Stipe talk about this. Like Stipe, when he was on Joe Rogan's podcast, like Joe asked him, had he ever contemplated about cutting to 205? And he's like, man, he's like, we thought about it one time. He's like, it would just be too much. He's like, 225, like you were talking about, cruiserweight would be perfect. But, even he knows his body just couldn't handle it. He just, he's not, because when you look at Steve, he's 6'4", but John Jones is 6'4", you know what I mean? Like,
Stipe may be a bad example because he happens to be the greatest champion in UFC heavyweight history. His motivation to cut to 205 is probably pretty low. So,
right.
But your point still stands.
Yeah, but it's just like, there's always going to be those cases where, it's just not good to do it. You know what I mean? It's just not like, no matter, the risk is not worth the potential reward. And that's the danger of weight cutting in MMA is because many...
You leave it to the athlete, that's the wrong person to leave it up to. And that's why the NCAA has their regulations. That's why ONE FC was proactive. You leave it to the athlete. They're going to make a bad decision probably the majority of the time, right? We're not, there's not too many MMA fighters. There's certainly some very intelligent ones, but there's, we have to, there's a reason why they're fighting MMA, right? Not because they're out there solving nuclear physics or anything.
Well, I mean, that's just the real, like, I remember, TJ Grant, who was, one of the kind of, like, great tragedies of our sport, dealing with that concussion that kind of knocked him out forever. But, like, he was a pretty decent welterweight. Like, he was a solid welterweight, but he knew if he could cut 15 pounds, he would be a big lightweight with a lot of size, a lot of power, and he did it. And he had a lot of success, and no one could have predicted what was going to happen with the concussion. But that's it. That TJ Grant. That's the reason guys see that potential. Like, I'm a middle of the road welterweight, but I could be a champion at lightweight if I could just kill myself to cut those extra 15 pounds. And guess what? It almost worked for a guy like that. It's almost worked for a lot of guys like that.
And then you have to wonder if that played any role in concussion too.
Absolutely. I mean, look at Anthony Pettis. Anthony Pettis always felt like he was an undersized lightweight. He wasn't the biggest lightweight, so he cut to featherweight. Backfired horrendously on him. I mean, he got knocked out. Never been knocked out before. Got knocked out by Max Holloway, and obviously credit to Max Holloway as well, but I mean, he'd never been knocked out. Got knocked out because the weight cut killed him. You know what I mean? Like, he was a slightly undersized lightweight, but he just killing himself to cut to featherweight. Like, that's just the nature of the beast, man. People, and that's what you're talking about. Leaving it up to the fighter, rarely will they make... That's like the whole idea of throwing in the towel. You know what I mean? Like, the reason you're throwing in the towel from the corner, because the fighter's never going to want to quit. You're never going to hear a fighter say, I'm out, I'm done, throw it, I'm done.
Yeah, and that's one of the differences in boxing. At least from my experience, is the trainer-athlete relationship is generally a lot more professional. In MMA, there's something about it where we really become very bonded with our coaches, and probably because we do a lot more training with them. Whereas a boxing coach says do this, do that, and holds pads. Whereas more MMA coaches, I would say, are a lot more hands-on. Probably, grapple at minimum, grapple with their students, maybe wrestle with them, whatever. But and I think that has a little bit to do with the boxing being able to throw in the towel a lot easier. But circling back, this is where, again, I think more weight classes would help. Like Anthony Pettis would probably be great around 150, 148 or something like that. But that 10-pound difference really puts him in an awkward position. And, not saying I have all the answers, but I think that's a good start. Now, I have a lot of answers for all the problems, whether they're feasible or not, is a different question.
Yeah. Are you a fan of the early morning weigh-ins? That's been a big question with people. How do you feel about those?
No, just going back and forth. Well, not back and forth. I was talking with Luke Thomas the other day on Twitter. I actually sent him a pretty lengthy email because he asked me. It was when Uriah Hall had that problem, and he put something on Twitter saying, I can't remember what he said, but he was basically just putting out there, I don't really understand why this has been happening since the early weigh-ins. And I said, hey, I'll explain to you what my feelings about it, but I have to email it. It's too much to tweet. And, we could get into more depth on that. I don't think we'll have time today. I'm not sure where we're running here, but at some time, we could certainly dig deeper into that convo. But basically, you're losing sleep one way or another. You're cutting weight the night before, along with the morning of. For me personally, one of the bigger things is I'm fighting one of the late fights. I'm not on a prelim earlier or anything. So for 6-8 weeks, I'm tuning my body to performing at nighttime and peaking out at nighttime. I want my hormones peaking at nighttime and melatonin and things like that peaking at a certain time in the mornings, right? And now suddenly the day before, on the most stressful day, because I have to cut the most weight, and obviously it's stressful physically and mentally, that's the day that I stress my body the most, and now I'm losing sleep on top of that. And I'm probably not getting as high a quality of sleep because I'm cutting weight the night before, because I won't have time to cut it all in one day. Now, when we used to weigh in at 4 o'clock, even though we had to sit around for like 2 hours and do medicals, and which was just, I can't explain how ridiculous it was. that it was set up that way, but I actually liked it better, because I could wake up at my regular time. I would even eat in the mornings, have some coffee, and then go do my weight cut. And I have time. I could take my time, make sure I did it right, have everything set up, and be patient with it. Some of my latest weight cuts with the early morning weigh-ins, I'm rushing. We start getting to the point where you're like, dude, your time's starting to run short. It's 9 o'clock. Usually have like either 10 to 12 or 9 to 11. I can't remember which one. Usually, I think 10 to 12. They'd be like, man, it's 10 o'clock, man. How many pounds you got left? And you're like, fuck, I got to really start pushing it now. So it's sort of a lot of little things that just stack on top of each other. And this was exactly what I was talking about before. When the stress levels start rising, then the cortisol levels start rising. When the cortisol levels start rising, this is when your body just shuts down and says, fuck you, like you were talking about.
Yeah. Well, I never really thought about that, but I know from talking to you and millions of other fighters that, like if you're fighting on the East Coast, like let's say you're fighting in Ohio, and you're the main event like you were in Cincinnati when you fought Eric Silva, you're not walking to the cage until 12:30 at night. So you'll adjust your training schedule to where you are getting those late night sessions in. I talk to fighters all the time. Like I'll text somebody, I'll say, hey, you do an interview at 8 or 9 o'clock. You're like, oh, I'm going to be in training because I know I'm a fighter around that time. Like that's when they're trying to peak their body. I never thought about that. That's actually something I never even thought about that. Like trying to just dramatically change your body to get up at 8 in the morning or 6 in the morning to start cutting weight when you've been conditioned for 7 weeks, 8 weeks to have your body peak performing at 11 p.m. or 10 p.m. or whatever.
Yeah, so, on that, try to think of, 7, 8 in the morning doesn't sound early. Like, I get up 6, 7 in the morning every day. I got 3 kids, and I got to get them to school. And even if I want to sleep in, I don't really get a chance. But we make a specific, when we get 6 to 8 weeks, usually 4 to 6 weeks out of fight, we change the routine. My wife does a good job and, shuts the door, tells the kids, you got to be quiet. And, I start getting adapted to that later schedule. So what basically ends up happening is when you, just imagine yourself. Well, I know you sleep in pretty late, but, imagine getting up 4 or 5 hours earlier than what you normally would. And now you're already on a lack of sleep, most likely, because you were cutting some the night before. But now you're putting your body through what is probably one of the most stressful experiences that a person could put their body through. I mean, dehydrating yourself to the extremes that most fighters do is the event of your body. And this is also all happens to be coming on the night before the most dangerous thing you're going to do. And, we maybe do it 3 times a year. It's certainly the most dangerous 3 days of the year that you're going to have. So it's when you need to be at your best.
Absolutely. No, we could spend several podcasts talking about this I think it's an important subject to talk about because, we can talk, like as journalists, we can talk about it all day, but we don't live it. You guys live it. Like you live it, like when you're getting ready for a camp, you know what it's like. So I like that perspective, literally what you just said right there about peaking at a certain time and then, changing. Like I didn't think of that. Like I know it's a different shift, like, the idea of cutting weight earlier to give you more time to recover. But, like, I didn't think about, oh, yeah, by the way, you're trying to peak your body out at 10 p.m. at night every day, and then suddenly you have to get your body in, to react to you the right way at 8 o'clock in the morning. I never, that's something I wouldn't have thought of. So, yeah, I mean, it's an important subject that we have to discuss.
Yeah, and there's certainly another side of it, too, where, I weighed in at, say, 11, 12 o'clock, noon, not fighting till midnight the next night. That's a long time to recover.
Yeah.
There's a very long recovery. So, whereas, if it's 4 o'clock, that's that's 4, 5, 6 hours that you're lacking in recovery. So that's sort of the other side. And I think that's one thing that the Jeff Nowitzki people and the UFC brass, whoever they might be, I don't know hardly any of them anymore. The commissioners, whatever, the people and the powers that be. I guess I'll leave it at that. That's probably the side that they're seeing. And there's something to be said about that. I mean, I certainly feel that goes a long way. I definitely come into the fight feeling like, yeah, I am more hydrated probably than I would have been. My eating schedule, my stomach and everything is a little bit more back to normal than it would have been otherwise. I'm not sure, where the right balance is though, right? Because I'd rather have the sleep personally.
Yeah, that's like I said, we'll dig into this more as time goes on, because I think it's something important to talk about. And I think everyone, it's educational not only for us, but it's also educational for fans that don't understand. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot more to weight cutting than just sitting in a sauna for 2 hours and shedding some water weight. Like, there's just a lot more that goes into it, and we're seeing it more and more in the sport, how it's just affecting more and more fighters. And it's not something that it hasn't happened in the past, but as big as the sport is getting, it's becoming a much bigger issue, on a bigger scale, I guess is the best way to say it. So,
yeah, it's exactly. And I mean, I can't say it enough times. I mean, it's going to change. I don't doubt that for 1 second. But is it going to change because of a proactive action or because of a reactive action?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. Real quick, we're going to get out of here right now, but I'll throw it out to you real quick. Fight this weekend. Derek Brunson, Jacare Souza. Who you picking?
I lean towards Jacare.
I'm going with Derek Brunson. So there we go. Another fight pick that we're opposite on, Matt. We'll see.
Who else is on the card? Who we got?
Dennis Bermudez is fighting Andre Feely. Gregor Gillespie's fighting on the card. That kid's a stud, man. I like that kid a lot. Gregor Gillespie's a stud. He's fighting on the card. I'm trying to remember who else is on the card, but I know there's it's a weird main card. It's not a very big, like, Fox main card, but the main event's really good. Like, Derek Brunson Jacare is a good fight.
That's a very good fight, yeah. And we'll have to dig deeper into that when we get a little closer.
Yeah, we got next week. We got Valentina Shevchenko making her flyweight debut next weekend. Machida's back, so lots of stuff to talk about.
Oh, Machida's back? Who the hell is Machida fighting?
Eric Anders, that kid who used to play football for Alabama.
Dude, where the hell have I been?
Yeah.
Machida's the man.
Yeah, fighting the main event in that Brazil card. Valentina Shevchenko making her flyweight debut. So, yeah, John Dodson's fighting Pedro Munoz. It's a pretty good card.
It's nice. So Machida's not the main event?
He is the main event. Him and Eric Anders are the main event.
Oh, okay. So the Shevchenko card is separate card.
No, same card, but she's like co-main event.
I got you. Okay.
Yeah, so
got clear today.
Yeah, I gotta be clear. Sorry, but all right, we're gonna get out of here. Obviously, Matt, always make sure to follow him on Twitter at I am the Immortal. Make sure to follow me on Twitter at Damon Martin. Hopefully, we'll get our boy Loper back in here. We record a little bit later at night. He's not a late night person, so he couldn't do the podcast. Although I told him, I said, with you in fight camp, we're gonna be doing the podcast at really weird, fucked up times now. So
yeah, right.
I always tell you, man. I always tell you, I'm like, dude, if you want to do the podcast like 1 a.m, like, that's totally cool with me, dude. Like, I'd rather do it 1 a.m than 8 a.m. Trust me.
I know. Well, Loper gets up at 4 a.m, so I get his dilemma. I get it.
Yeah. So, all right, everyone. Appreciate everyone tuning in. Make sure you check us out on iTunes. Make sure you check us out on Libsyn. Follow us over there, and always hashtag us if you got questions, anything for the podcast. Hashtag Fight Society, and we will see you guys next week for more Fight Society podcast. See you then. Oh, what's that?